Welcome to the Service MVP podcast. My name is Joe Crisara, America's service sales coach. We have with us a very special guest. His name is Stephen Little from High Pro Services in Cambridge, Ontario. Stephen, welcome to our show here today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Stephen runs a very dynamic company in just a little bit west of Toronto. He's got plumbing and drain and different types of services like that he offers. I want you to start by telling us a little bit about how you kind of got started in this business and how you found your way to running a company like HiPro.
Well, I got started when I was a teenager. I followed my dad's footsteps. He was a plumber. Came over from England when I was 15. And he bought into a Mr. Rooter, which also had a HiPro. And it was one truck. Just one truck for each company. And after learning the business, I kind of took over around 2015. We've just been growing ever since then, learning a lot every day. And
So for about 8 years now, you're into this
about
thing.
eight years as the owner.
You own it. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, today we're going to do a thing called the 3 mistakes that contractors commonly make when they're trying to be successful. And probably since 2015, I assume that you have made some of these mistakes. Does that sound right?
That's correct.
I think, well, let's talk about that. When we say it's 3 mistakes you need to learn from, why are making mistakes an important thing to own up to? Tell us about that. Why is it the mistakes would be better than just...
When you can take accountability for yourself, you can learn and move forward. You can step back and kind of analyze where you've gone wrong. I mean, you've been helping me along with that recently about being a leader, being a good leader, not just expecting your employees to follow the system, but you have to follow it and you have to be in there ahead of them, leading it too, spearheading everything.
So I guess that would be the first mistake then you're saying is that, tell us the first mistake. The first mistake was that the leader is not leading. He's kind of just like watching other people do it or whatever. He's a spectator, not something that's involved. Tell us about that.
The leader's not leading because he's too busy. Like we've had this conversation before. He's too busy, but really he's making excuses for himself because he doesn't want to do the hard thing, doing the hard work. When you lead by example, and when you lead with the guys, like they have so much more respect for you. And the guys have actually come up and told me that myself.
Really?
And we're getting good results. Before I wasn't doing that. It was kind of a lesson that you taught me when I came to the leadership here. Kind of give me heck.
Yeah, I gave you a little bit.
Give me heck.
Push back.
And Michael Munoz give me heck a little bit. And it made me evaluate myself and say, you know what, I just have to get in there and do this. I just have to get in there and do this. And it changed everything. We're growing 40% since that day I came.
That's amazing. So really it's like that the leader expecting people to do something that they've never done themselves, leading people somewhere that you've never been, right? It's how frustrating is it though when you are trying to lead that way? And can you describe some of the frustration with those mistakes that happen like that?
Leading where you've never been.
Expecting the guys to get it, but you haven't ever got it yourself even.
As the leader, everyone wants an answer from you. And if you don't have the right answer, or you can't come up with a reasonable answer, you're going to lose everything.
Yeah, if you can't get the right direction, well, if you've never been down that path, how would you know what direction to send people to go? Because really, to me, the job of the leader of the company or the owner of the company is to make sure people you're leading them down a certain path and finding that path for them, and to illuminate the path for the person, right?
Yeah.
Of course, if you don't know where the path is or never been down that path, it becomes very difficult to illuminate the path yourself. Do you really have to be the best guy at this to be able to at least go through the training yourself? Even if you're not the best, what value does it have that the guys get from that when they see you doing this?
I think what I've learned is you got to have the best team. And the team's got to be, you got to make sure they hold you accountable. There's nothing more that I like when I get held accountable for we work very hard at the meeting. At the end, I would say, I'm disappointed. No one held me accountable. I didn't show up last week. I think that's important because it gives people more confidence, and they want to take you. Like we're uncharted waters. I don't have any answers for everything, so we have to do this as a team because we're illuminating, like you said, illuminating the path for people behind us. So if you do this as a group, I think that's the key is finding a real good team that you're all on the same page, you all have a clear vision, and there's no titles. Titles are left out the door. We're all doing this together. That's what I learned. That's my experience with this.
Yeah, I guess the best way to put it is that if you're leading the way and people are following you, you got the flashlight watching the holding the path, as opposed to being an owner who sits on the sidelines and makes their guys lead the path and then watches them fail, and it's like those guys are, I don't know, I pay for all this training and they're not using it or whatever kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, and I can see that old mentality too. You have to be able to come back and just give yourself some accountability. You have to be able to look in. Sometimes you need someone to tell you, like Michael Munoz and me, tell me I'm terrible at role play because I hadn't graduated. And you told me here, you need someone. It's hard to get out of that mentality. You think you're the owner, your way's the best way, and it really takes a lot of effort to kind of reflect on that.
Sounds like you're arriving right there, which is that another mistake is just not taking ownership of a problem, like you're like denial or somebody else's fault, not pointing the finger out
Yeah.
there somewhere rather than saying, "Hey, this is my responsibility." Right.
Yeah.
So tell us about responsibility in the leadership position.
Responsibility in a leadership position. So if someone on the team is not performing and they're disgruntled, if you point one finger, you're gonna have three pointing back.
Mm.
What could have I done? What have I done to make this guy disgruntled? Or what haven't I done? It's the questions you should be asking. What can I do to make this? We've got a goal of 20 million. We're not getting there. And it's not fingers pointing that way. The finger should be pointing this way.
Can you expand more on what you think would be the first step we'd have to evaluate whether we're falling short of our goals? Instead of saying that's your fault, guys, it's in how can the owner take responsibility in that regard? What can the owner do at that point when the whole team is falling short there?
If the whole team's falling short, we could also ask, what am I doing wrong? We've noticed some gaps in the system. I think am I failing you? Can you give me some feedback? Is there anything that you guys would like to see me do in order to reach these goals? Because sometimes you just don't have all the answers.
I know one of the things you really believe in a lot because you've invested so much in it, and not so much. I mean, you invest a lot of money in this. Don't get me wrong, but the time you've invested is just stunning. Would you say that as you've invested more time and more financial resources into the training, what is the return on investment for that? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's made me closer to the team, closer to the companies.
So that's one of the tangible things
Yeah.
that you feel like you have more intimate appeal and conversation with the team that are real conversations, not
Right.
just conversations in passing like
Right.
plumbers from Ontario would normally do.
Right.
You haven't said, "Hey, what's really going on?" type of thing.
Exactly.
Because you're not your closer. So that's one of the returns on investment you get. It doesn't have to be financial. It could just be that element of it, right?
That's right. And financial, that's going up a lot. Like
It is.
we're growing up. Well, since we started, we're double our job average.
Really.
We've over doubled our job average.
So if you had I call it a pencil pusher in accounting, who's like, you got to justify this to your CFO to do more training. What would you say the return on investment would look like for that?
Profit percentage has not changed. It's still maintaining, but we're still spending a lot of money. We're making more money because our revenue's higher. So if we didn't spend this money, our profits probably be half what we were.
Be flat,
Yeah.
yeah. Because whether the costs are increasing, the gap is between the cost increasing and our ability to communicate increasing as well. And the training is something that is necessary to fill that gap. Would you say that's true?
I would say that's true. Well, I do want to say the biggest satisfaction I had putting in this training is when I'm away, that meeting goes like it's clockwork. The next guy takes lead. They all take turns in being the leader, and like that's a good feeling for me.
Share that leadership.
Building a good culture, it just makes things feel so much better walking into work. Even for the guys, we can feel things changing. And some of the guys that weren't on board at the beginning, they're begging to get onto this course now. Now they're begging to
So it's kind of turned it around from being resistant to be like, when can I be next? When can I be next?
When can I be?
So there's a tipping point. I think when employees start to feel like it was like I got to do this extra training and stuff like that, as opposed to wait a second, this training is not extra. This is something that I need. I've been lacking, and it's been a missing piece, right?
Mhm.
Have you seen employees like kind of wake up to this has been a missing piece in their life that
Yeah.
you're finally providing that piece? What do you think of that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, Eric, you know Eric.
Oh yeah, one of your great things. Yeah.
He's really, really coming along with this. He's mentoring some of the other guys. We've had one guy who's his system works better, but now he's doing homework
Hmm.
off his hours, so like after hours, so we can get into the course and be on our team.
Nice.
So yeah, it's really like it's really a good feeling when that happens.
That is really good. That's good. When people kind of come around to it, and this is a tipping point. I always say it's kind of like, yeah, I think we're on the, I think we're down the on the other part because it feels like it's kind of the wagon's rolling downhill. It's not having to push the rock uphill all the
Right.
time, right? One of the things you mentioned to me was a third mistake
Mhm.
is the paying attention to financials and
Paying
things like that.
attention to
Because
finance.
all the stuff you're doing, there does have to be a result that is tangible, and that
Mhm.
usually is measured by some of the financials you get and things like that, right? So,
That's right.
what advice can you give somebody about that, about the financials, to watch your financials and things like that?
I do recommend reading a book by Ellen Roth. Where did
Ellen
all the
Rohr,
money
yeah,
go? Ellen Roth. Where
good
did
friend
all
of
the
ours,
money
yeah.
go? And I think it's very important because you can easily get carried away with yourself. You knowing what your break even is, knowing your net profit and percentage profit,
Mhm.
and learning how to budget is, I think, having a good controller, bookkeeper, whatever stage you're at. I think that's very, very important, and the owner of the company should always have a seat in that position
Yeah.
because they're ultimately they're in control of the money. I have seen, unfortunately, people that business owners in the plumbing industry, they're exceptionally good.
Mhm.
But they just didn't watch their numbers and didn't make it.
Good plumbers, but they just didn't have the financials down, or they
Good.
weren't financially able to make it all work financially.
They spent too much. They grew too quick, bought too much equipment, and then when slow time came, they didn't plan for it.
What are some of the standards you have at Hypro that you can share with the rest of the groups here?
I think that falls into the culture. We've just over the past few years, we've just developed a culture there. We only hire people that share our values, and I guess with leadership, everyone kind of you kind of all get on the same page. If someone's a bad apple and disgruntled, or you get some of those people once in a while, we can't turn them around. We that's something we don't tolerate, and the guys don't like having that behavior around. So I think having a good culture, if that's what you're talking about.
So one of the standards would be you're saying that you have to enjoy this job. You have to if you're not enjoying this job, if this job is something that you hate doing, that's one of those things that you have to say we have to change that or change your job here, right? Either change the job or change the attitude type of thing, right?
We do have a saying: if you're not happy here, we'll help you find another job,
Hmm.
but we want you here happy.
Yeah.
That's what we say to them. And a lot of people are happy. It's very rare now since we came up with we had talked about this in meetings that we I would say if someone's a bad apple, they've only just been hired and it's been bred into them from their old company.
Hmm.
So, but it's amazing because it will be the employees that will come to you and say, "Listen, I don't want to work around this guy. He's too negative."
Mm. So you actually have the employees saying that to you about
It's
this,
the
right?
employees, yeah,
So it's not like you're not like you just figure it out, like you're dialing it in.
yeah,
The employees kind of vote with with their involvement. Like
yeah.
I don't really want to be involved with that person because that's too much negativity I'm feeling at that part.
That's correct. Yeah,
That's great. Well, as a leader, that's one of the things that they're looking to you to take action, right? I guess if you're not leading, sometimes we have a blind spot. We allow negative people to be on the team. Can you speak to that a little bit about what about somebody who's
yes,
very productive
yes.
financially, but they're not productive from that attitude standpoint? Have you ever experienced that where
Yeah.
somebody makes money, but they're kind of not helping the culture kind of work
Right.
together as a team?
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been through this a few times, and I learned my lessons, and I have a rule on it. But it doesn't matter how much financially someone does, if they're making, if they're ruining the culture is far more important than one person's results.
Mm.
And usually, what happens as soon as that guy's gone, someone else will take his spot with a better attitude, and the whole team kind of has like a boost. Um, but it's just, in my opinion, it's just not worth it to compromise your culture over results.
Stephen, can you give contractors who may have been struggling the way you were struggling before, just give them some final thoughts or tips from the heart, if you don't mind? Give it, I call it the heart talk at the
The
end
heart
here.
talk,
Let me
absolutely.
say, what's in your heart? What can you tell these guys that that to be hopeful and to be optimistic about things? What can you do to encourage them?
The main leader needs to come to total immersion. The main leader needs to come to total immersion in class first, and they really need to understand the system, not so much in its entirety, but at least the basics if they're expecting any results. That's going to be my number one tip. My second tip would be, after you've done that, find a good core group of people that really are taken to this, and then start coming out, do the leadership course first, and then start developing one team, and then branch out into a couple more teams.
Do the leadership course is only for the main leaders, or would that benefit anybody in the company?
I think that will benefit anyone in the company, especially the ones that are taken to the total immersion. I think that the leadership, correct me if I'm wrong, I see is kind of like the second course you should take after total immersion. And I think it should be taken, if you get a good tech, I think it should be like a refresher once a year is what we're thinking about.
Yeah,
Something-
that's great. I would say recertification is an important part of
Recertification.
it. I always say the leadership part of it is interesting because, people are like, well, I'm not really leading the company, but you know what? You may not be leading the company, but even your own family is like a company, right?
Yeah.
You got you and your wife are like the CEO and the CFO. One's a CEO, one's a CFO. Then you got the kids who are the board of directors, kind of seeing if this is the right kind of way we want to do it. So in a way, we're kind of running a business in our family too. I think that leadership course. Would you say it's valuable beyond the trades, that you hear things in there that
For
that
sure.
can benefit you personally?
Yeah, it can benefit you in parenting. The gap sheet is great. Practice it on your kids.
Right.
We have a gap here. You're not doing your homework.
Some things that you should be doing that you're not doing.
Yeah.
And give maybe your kids can get a gap sheet on you and say, hey, Dad, you're supposed to be doing this with me, but we're not doing that anymore.
That's right.
So I mean, how important is that part of it for leaders to be vulnerable enough to accept critique from your team or from your own family?
I think it's very important to accept critique. Communication is super important. Receiving it and giving it. And I think if I'm right, this taking total immersion, and it's like having a PhD in communication.
That's great. Well, Stephen, I want to say again, thank you for being on the show here today and spending your time, for coming 3 times out to Los Angeles from Cambridge, Ontario. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We'll see you on the next podcast.